words are from Frederick Douglass. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are people who want crops without plowing the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out what people will submit to, and you have found out the exact amount of injustice which will be imposed upon them. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress. And our chalice words are, may we be reminded here of our highest aspirations and inspired to bring out gifts of love and service to the altar of humanity. May we know once again that we are not isolated beings, but connected in mystery and miracle to the universe, to this community, and to each other. Please rise as you are willing and able. We will sing hymn number 104, When Israel Was in Egypt's Land, and remain standing for our covenant. Let's recite the words of our covenant. We unite to strengthen the bonds of kinship among all persons, to promote human dignity, and to increase reverence for life's creating, sustaining, and transforming power through worship, study, and service. You may be seated. The impact of Dred Scott versus Sanford. On March 6, 1857, the Supreme Court handed down its decision in the Dred Scott case, which had a direct impact on the coming of the Civil War and Abraham Lincoln's presidency 4 years later. The case of Dred Scott versus Sanford was one of the most controversial decisions in the court's history. At the time, the Supreme Court's majority of justices came from pro-slavery states or had connections to pro-slavery presidents. The Dred Scott decision came just 2 days after President James Buchanan took office, and it set the term for his controversial term that led to the Civil War. Chief Justice Roger Taney gave the court's opinion. It had ruled 7-2 against Scott. Taney announced that enslaved persons were not citizens of the United States and had no rights to sue in federal courts. In fact, blacks couldn't be citizens. The court also declared the Missouri Compromise of 1820 to be unconstitutional, and it said that Congress did not have the authority to prohibit slavery in the territories. The decision was celebrated in the South and by slavery supporters. There was outrage in the North and among abolitionists. One person who was publicly upset with the Dred Scott decision was Abraham Lincoln, who was a rising figure in the newly formed Republican Party. The case was a focal point of the famous debates between Lincoln and Stephen Douglas in 1858. The decision also made the Republican Party a national force during the 1860 presidential elections. The growing power of the Republicans, who received considerable support from the northern states, directly led to fears in the South that slavery would be ended. And those fears fueled the momentum for secession and the Civil War. Dred Scott died in 1858, about a year after he and his family had gained their freedom, when his enslaver sent the Scotts back to their original owners, who promptly freed them. Taney passed away in 1864. A year later, a request to include a bust of Taney in a hall that recognized Chief Justices was blocked by the Republicans. I declare that the opinion of the Chief Justice in the case of Dred Scott was more thoroughly abominable than anything of the kind in the history of the courts. Judicial baseness reached its lowest point on that occasion, said Charles Sumner, a leading radical Republican. After the Civil War, the 13th Amendment and the 14th Amendment effectively overturned the Dred Scott decision. At this time, we will take an offering collection. Let there be an offering to sustain this place which is sacred to so many of us, a community of memory and of hope, for we are now keepers of the dream.
This reading isn't a reading. What we typically do for these summer sermons is a very brief capsule of background information, and you've already heard about the Dred Scott decision, which is one of the most vilified Supreme Court decisions ever. But first, I just wanted to talk about the process of coming up with a subject for this Sunday service. What I've tried to do in past services like this is to find a historical piece, examine it in the context of its time, and also hopefully get us to think about what and how it relates to today. And those of you who are really clever will kind of see where this is going. This wasn't my first choice. This started as a search to find Unitarian or Universalist sermons from around this time that dealt with the divisiveness and overheated rhetoric in the lead up to the 1860 secession crisis and the ensuing Civil War. I read way too many sermons from 1855 to 1865, and yes, I need a hobby. But I could not find a voice that was reasonable, peaceful, and had any inkling of the carnage that was just around the corner. Certainly this wisdom was there somewhere if I only looked hard enough. One of the galvanizing moments in this period was the Fugitive Slave Act, which we examined previously from Emerson's perspective. The famous Unitarian theologian and minister Theodore Parker was directly involved in an incident in 1854 that attempted to forcibly release from jail a slave held in Boston by federal authorities, which ended up in a riot and a federal marshal dead and several others wounded. Now, Thomas Bronson Alcott, noted transcendentalist, education reformer, father of Louisa May Alcott, led the charge up the courthouse stairs. I searched through Parker's sermons and came up with nothing that really fit. There's a lot of interesting stuff, but nothing that... I also searched out sermons by Thomas Starr King, especially his campaign to keep California in the Union. King was so revered by Californians that he was one of the two statues chosen to be displayed in the National Statuary Hall in the U.S. Capitol until he was replaced by a statue of Ronald Reagan. I was beginning to get a little nervous as I went down rabbit hole after rabbit hole, not finding the right piece. Then the Supreme Court came out with its decisions on several cases the first part of this month. Trump versus the United States, the Chevron decision, official proceedings decisions, to name three highlights. Along with an unasked for consenting opinion from Justice Thomas on the constitutionality of the Office of Independent Counsel, the Jack Smith prosecutions. This was a little gift to the defense that resulted in Judge Cannon dismissing the classified documents case in Florida, which happened to coincide with the opening night of the RNC in Milwaukee. You can't make this stuff up. Now, if I were to put this in one of my alternate history novels as fiction, my editor would toss it back to me telling me it's too improbable because no one would believe it if this kind of thing happened in the open. I would have to rewrite it using some complex John le Carré conspiracy to make it believable enough for the reader. If you follow history too closely in fiction, people will believe you are making it up and doing it badly. One of the perils of writing historical fiction. They say that history doesn't repeat itself, but at times it rhymes. In our 24-hour news cycle, it's hard to discern the truly important among all the loud buzzing and shouting about why we should be afraid of this, that, or them. But my guess, and again, I'm just some guy who needs a hobby, my guess is that 50 or 100 years from now, historians will be talking about the Roberts Court the same way people talk today about the Taney Court. Partisan, divisive, orchestrated, and wrong. Now, Lincoln's acceptance speech was delivered in the Illinois State House chambers as part of the convention to select a Republican candidate for the U.S. Senate. This was pre-Beard Lincoln, tough and wiry circuit-riding lawyer, 45 years old, brilliant, capable, methodical, sure of his voice, honed in courtrooms across the state. He realized he was going up against Stephen Douglas, who was a well-established statesman, a Washington insider, and leader of the Democratic Party. A David and Goliath story, which Lincoln lost, but in losing, he set himself up to eventually and improbably win. Of course, slavery was the major issue of the day, deeply divisive, emotionally charged, but there was much, much more going on than a binary yes or no question. For instance, have you heard the term free soilers? I think we all have, right? Free soil party. This was not about free farmland stolen from indigenous people, and it wasn't entirely about preventing the expansion of slavery strictly on moral grounds. It was about what the country was going to look like in the West. If you were an immigrant looking to build a life in the West, like had been going on for 50 years, everything west of the Mississippi River now, generally, could be a slave economy, owned by wealthy and powerful landowners, like in the South, worked by slaves, like in the South. How would there be any way you could compete with that system? Unless that soil was free, the massive immigrants would have no opportunity, no place to go. In Mr. Lincoln's speech, he talks about some random guys building a building. He seemingly pulls some names out of the air. Each of those names has meaning to the audience of the day. Stephen, Franklin, Roger, and James. Stephen Douglas, Franklin Pierce, James Buchanan, and Roger Taney. Not only was Stephen Douglas his opponent for the Senate, but he was also the main author of the Nebraska bill, which you'll hear about. I am sure that someday I can find the sermon I was originally looking for, somewhere. But after many hours of searching and really giving my Google skills a workout, I came up blank. Perhaps the divisions were too deep. There were too many powerful political forces, slavery empowered in the government, too much radicalization in the pulpits, too little thought to the consequences of where this might lead. Instead, I can only offer the words of Mr. Lincoln.
Still my song shall be
This speech was given actually in the Illinois State House. In its original format, it's probably twice as long as what I've got here in the interest of time, and I probably apologize for all the talkiness in this one. It's very talky, but it's 19th century stuff, so yeah, it is what it is. Let's just go. Oh, I want to note about language. It's 19th century, obviously, so I haven't changed any of that. Mr. President and gentlemen of the convention, if we could first know where we are and whither we are tending, we could better judge what to do and how to do it. We are now far into the 5th year since the policy was initiated with the avowed object and confident promise of putting an end to slavery agitation. Under the operation of that policy, that agitation has not only not ceased, but has constantly augmented. In my opinion, it will not cease until a crisis shall have been reached and passed. A house divided against itself cannot stand. I believe this government cannot endure permanently half slave and half free. I do not expect the Union to be dissolved. I do not expect the house to fall, but I do expect it will cease to be divided. It will become all one thing or all the other. Either the opponents of slavery will arrest the further spread of it, or its advocates will push it forward till it shall become alike lawful in all states, old as well as new, north as well as south. Let anyone doubts confidently contemplate that a now almost complete legal combination, piece of machinery, so to speak, compounded of the Nebraska Doctrine and the Dred Scott decision. Let him consider not only what work the machinery is adapted to do and how well adapted, but also let him study the history of its construction and trace, if he can, or rather fail if he can, to trace the evidences of design and concert of action among its chief bosses from the beginning. The new year of 1854 found slavery excluded from more than half the state-by-state constitutions and from most of the national territory by congressional prohibition. 4 days later commenced the struggle which ended in repealing that congressional prohibition. This opened all the national territory to slavery and was the first point gained and was incorporated into the Nebraska bill itself. But, said opposition members, let us be more specific. Let us amend the bill so as to expressly declare that the people of the territory may exclude slavery. Not we, said the friends of the measure, and down they voted the amendment. While the Nebraska bill was passing through Congress, a law case involving the question of a Negro's freedom was passing through the U.S. Circuit Court for the District of Missouri, and both Nebraska bill and lawsuit were brought to a decision in the same month of May 1854. The Negro's name was Dred Scott, a name which now designates the decision made in the case. Before the next then presidential election, the law case came to and was argued in the Supreme Court of the United States, but the decision of it was deferred until after the election. Still, before the election, Senator Trumbull, on the floor of the Senate, requests the leading advocate of the Nebraska bill to state his opinion whether the people of a territory can constitutionally exclude slavery from their limits, and the latter answers, that is a question for the Supreme Court. The election came. Mr. Buchanan was elected, and the endorsement, such as it was, secured. That was the second point gained. The endorsement, however, fell short of a clear popular majority by nearly 400,000 votes, and so perhaps was not overwhelmingly reliable and satisfactory. The outgoing president, in his last annual message, as impressively as possible, echoed back upon the people the weight and authority of the endorsement. The Supreme Court met again, did not announce their decision, but ordered a re-argument. The presidential inauguration came, and still no decision of the court. But the incoming president, in his inaugural address, fervently exhorted the people to abide by the forthcoming decision, whatever it may be. Then, in a few days, came the decision. The reputed author of the Nebraska bill finds an early occasion to make a speech at this Capitol endorsing the Dred Scott decision and vehemently denouncing all opposition to it. The new president, too, seizes on the opportunity to endorse and strongly construe that decision and to express his astonishment that any different view had ever been entertained. The several points of the Dred Scott decision, in connection with Senator Douglas's care not policy, constitute the piece of machinery in its present state of advancement. The working points of the machinery are, first, that no Negro slave imported as such from Africa and no descendant of such slave can ever be a citizen of any state in the sense of that term is used in the Constitution of the United States. Secondly, that subject to the Constitution of the United States, neither Congress nor a territorial legislator can exclude slavery from any United States territory. Thirdly, and whether the holding of a Negro in actual slavery in a free state makes him free, the United States courts will not decide, but will leave to be decided by the courts of any slave state the Negro may be forced into by the master. This point is made to sustain the logical conclusion that what Dred Scott's master might lawfully do with Dred Scott in the free state of Illinois, every other master may lawfully do with any one or 1,000 slaves in Illinois or any other free state. Now, this shows exactly where we are now, and partially also whither we are tending. It will throw additional light on the latter to go back and run the mind over the string of historical facts already stated. Several things will now appear less dark and mysterious than they did when they were transpiring. The people were to be left perfectly free and subject only to the Constitution. What the Constitution had to do with it, outsides that could not plain see then, but now it was exactly fitted niche for the Dred Scott decision to come afterward in and declare that perfect freedom of the people to be just no freedom at all. Why was the amendment expressly declaring the right of the people to exclude slavery voted down? Plainly enough now, the adoption of it would have spoiled the niche for the Dred Scott decision. Why was the court decision held up? Why even a senator's individual opinion withheld till after the presidential election? Plainly enough now, the speaking out then would have damaged the perfectly free argument upon which the election was to be carried. Why the outgoing president's felicitation on the endorsement? Why the delay of a re-argument? Why the incoming president's advance exhortation in favor of the decision? These things look like the cautious patting and petting of a spirited horse preparatory to mounting him when it is dreaded he may give the rider a fall. We cannot absolutely know that all these exact adaptations are the result of free concept. But when we see a lot of frame timbers, different portions of which we know have been gotten out at different times and places and by different workmen, Stephen, Franklin, Roger, and James, for instance, and we see these timbers joined together and they exactly make the frame of a house or a mill, all the tenons and mortises fitting exactly all the lengths and proportions of the different pieces exactly adapted to their respective places, and not a piece too many or too few, omitting not even scaffolding, or if a single piece be lacking, we see the place in the frame exactly fitted and prepared to yet bring such a piece in. In such a case, we will find it impossible not to believe that Stephen and Franklin and Roger and James all understood one another from the beginning, and all worked up a common plan or draft drawn up before the first lick was struck. While the opinion of the court by Chief Justice Taney in the Dred Scott case and the separate opinions of all the concurring judges expressly declared that the Constitution of the United States neither permits Congress nor a territorial legislature to exclude slavery from any United States territory, they all omit to declare whether or not that same Constitution permits a state or the people of that state to exclude it. We shall lie down pleasantly dreaming that the people of Missouri are on the verge of making their state free. And we shall awake to the reality instead that the Supreme Court has made Illinois a slave state. To meet and overthrow the power of that destiny is the work now before all those who would prevent that consummation. That is what we have to do. Now, how best can we do it? There are those who denounce us openly and say that Senator Douglas is the aptest instrument there is. But can he run ahead and infer that he will make any particular change of which he himself has given no intimation? Can we safely base our action on any such vague inference? Our cause, then, must be entrusted to and conducted by its own undoubted friends, those whose hands are free, whose hearts are in the work, who do care for the result. 2 years ago, the Republicans of the nation mustered over 1,300,000 strong. We gathered from the four winds and formed and fought the battle through under the constant hot fire of a disciplined, proud, and pampered enemy. Did we brave all then to falter now when that same enemy is wavering, deserved, and belligerent? The result is not doubtful. We shall not fail if we stand firm. We shall not fail. Wise counsels may accelerate, or mistakes delay it, but sooner or later, the victory is sure to come. Please rise as you're willing and able to sing hymn 108, My Life Flows On, and the song.
My life goes on in endless song of Earth's lamentation. I hear the real far-off song that is a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, my shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing?
These are closing words. Go in peace. Live simply, gently, at home in yourselves. Act justly. Speak justly. Remember the depth of your own compassion. Forget not your power in the days of your powerlessness. Do not desire to be wealthier than your peers, and stint not your hand of charity. Practice forbearance. Speak the truth or speak not. Take care of yourselves as bodies, for you are a good gift. Crave peace for all the people in the world, beginning with yourselves, and go as you go with the dream of that peace alive in your heart.